Friends, family, and keepers of the faith, welcome to another Del Boy blog. And as always, I'm going to date stamp this. It's year 4, blog 49, blog number 205 in legacy numbers, and it's dated the 25th of January 2026. And as we know how many weeks there are in a year, I'm reaching where I go into year 5. How that's going to pan out, I have no idea. Last year was a mess for many reasons, but mostly mother's health, and it's impacted so much that I've managed, and I don't know how sometimes, to keep the blog going, but diminished output drastically, and I've been working hard to do a balance between some remnants of a life for me, but maintain always 100% and more to giving my mother everything that she needs and can. And that goes for everybody in my family. But what I have to say about all of that is that I will try to continue to adapt and move everything I do forward, make things better, take away things that I think that don't work, all of that sort of stuff. But it's more on the fly now than it is thoughts in regards to anniversaries like year 5 coming up and things like that. But I'm digressing a little bit. I look out the window and it looks like a typical January. Wet, damp, dull nights, drawing a still night very early, and daylight is still very late in the morning. It can get you depressed. I've tried to always be a glass half full than half empty all this year so far, and I think it's working. There's been so many knocks, and those knocks in the past would have compounded into something where you're like a pressure cooker and you would blow, when things got to a point. And because there are things that you can do and there's things that you can't do, and those things of you've got to budge them, and I'll explain all of that reasoning a little bit later on. But I've mentioned a little bit about the weather and how it can change your demeanor. But we'll do the news, and as always, I'm just going to start by saying there is no part on the war, but it's constantly always on my thoughts in regards to the people that are in that war and battling to get the end of the war in sight. And I hope that happens soon. Just because I don't mention it doesn't mean it's not in my thoughts. So that introduces the news that I've picked up. And, I've again tried to write some things down during the week rather than leaving it all to Sunday morning and then reading it out verbatim. It takes too much time. So what have I written down? These are the things that I've heard on the radio when I'm doing my walk during the week, and stuff that I've looked at that are happening today or been mentioned today. So one at the top says, decision is to be made on the Greater Manchester Mayor, whose name, by the way, is Andy Burnham, to be allowed to stand as a minister in the future by-election. Now, sounds boring, all of that, doesn't it? But they went into great detail on the radio in regards to the fact that a mayor can't also be a minister. You have to have special powers given by Parliament to be able to even consider it. And most of the party that he would want to be a minister in, which I believe in this part it's Labour, would have to look and see, is there a worth to it? And apparently the only reason that Andy Burnham would want to become a minister is to become a future PM. And that means that he would be up against Starmer, who's the current Labour leader, who also has criticism by the backbenchers. And that means, could they push back on this? So you can make your own minds up on this. Just because of that, should you hinder someone's progress? I don't like, though, political agendas. That the only reason that he's doing it is future for himself, rather than the people that he is supposed to be ministering for. And that's what a mayor sort of like does in part. A minister should be doing, but we all know that people sometimes go into politics, nothing to do with the constituents that they're supposed to put forward, your hindrances, when actually they're there just for their own political gain. But that's all politics, and it's crap. I don't really like talking about all of that. So the next one was high solar activity caused the northern lights to be seen across the UK and the Channel Islands on Monday night. Yes, it was all over the news, saying that it was happening that weekend, that it was extending into Monday and Tuesday, all because of high activity of the sun. And the pictures that came out were stunning, really, really stunning, that I saw throughout Tuesday and Wednesday on the internet. Not that the news showed too many of them. They did a couple, but, all afterthought type stuff. But I thought that was a nice story, and, it fits into things that I really like and enjoy, photography and, the very nature of the Northern Lights themselves. This house, I think, faces north, which means that I hoped I might be able to see it. But of course, in my garden, I've got huge trees. Can't really leave the house to see my mum. And I don't think it stretched that far south that I'd have been able to have seen it. But I believe it was a spectacle for slightly lower than Manchester. I think it stretched that far. So maybe Sheffield saw bits, possibly even Birmingham, but I don't think it stretched that far. And that, being as I'm 50 miles further south than that point, means that I had no chance, really. But I did go out into the garden, look, and couldn't see anything. And I did make a note of the time to do it. Shame. The next one is a sad story, and it hurt me to hear it, because a little bit about my father, really. My father used to get rod licenses from people that fished at a reservoir very near my house. He loved it because it got him out and he was walking and he could talk to other fishermen. But he was also a big person on wildlife, and I take it that comes from his fishing, because when you're fishing, whether you're pole fishing, float fishing, whatever, you look at the nature around. I remember going once and I was talking to my dad about kingfishers, and he said, I might be going somewhere where kingfishers are known to be around. Come along. I didn't go fishing that often with my father, but I so longed to see a kingfisher. But that's not what this story is about. When he did go to get the rod licenses later in his life, there were swans there, and he was very protective of the swans. The swans can be vicious little bastards, they can be they can peck at you, come at you, everything, especially when they've got the little ones with them. But my dad always took some bread. They came up to him, he'd put the bread down, they'd go there, and they'd even, I believe, take it out of his hand, which is something that you shouldn't really do to wildlife, getting that close to that type of wildlife bird. But this story was saddened because, and it states just like I'm going to read out. Many cases of swans dying of bird flu have been reported this week across the UK, and more than 30 were found dead and removed in Newbury alone. 30 swans all dying in a suspect of bird flu. And it's not just Newbury, it's across the country. And it's becoming an epidemic for that particular type of bird. It's so sad to hear that, but the very mention of the word swans brings back memories of my dad, which sort of like was a good thing, but it made me think about how the swans are now since my dad died. Who's going there and feeding them, who's protecting them, who's looking at them, all of that sort of stuff. Fishermen are not well known to think about this. There's many swans have been caught up in hooks from fishing line, and the actual fishing line itself intertwining around their necks and all sorts of stuff as they've gone to bottom feed, off of the bottom of the reservoir. So yeah, many things there that distress me. Another political one here. Starmer was in talks this week with Trump over Greenland, and he swore that British principles will be upheld and the grounds of ownership of Greenland will be pushed back as Trump rises at a strategy for getting Greenland. Yes, he's been saying that tariffs will be raised for all European countries that push back on the sovereignty, I suppose, of Greenland, for which we're definitely on the minds of the Danes should have the fight, the say on Greenland, not for political gain, minerals, land ownership, all of that sort of stuff. That's my only opinion. I agree that it's in the hands of the Danes, nobody else. This week again is something that I would have been all over, but less so now, and that is it was Oscar nomination week. They were announced, and there were little surprises reported by many media outlets. What that basically means is we thought these films would be there. They were. We thought these actors and actresses would be mentioned. They were. There was very little surprises. There were some good stories in regards to the same categories that you always get, which is short films or short animation films with one particular film creator of a live film. It's his first time film and has got an Oscar nomination. How much of a boost would that give you in going now into film and doing bigger and better? That's the good side, I think, of the Oscars. The rest is pants, crap, not really interested, same old. Got to have some diversity in it, got to have some category in it that Oscars love, which is period dramas and all of this sort of stuff, so they can get nominations for costume design and all of that sort of stuff. All films should be given to the director and the producers and the writers and be looked at for the worth of what they are. Shouldn't just think of dramas always getting the lion's share. Do look at things in that particular way, I would say. There should be, when was the last time really that there were many comedies recognised, or science fiction or horror, these ones that we all go and see, but the Oscars bypass because they don't recognize them as any worth, is my opinion. And that's all I've got on that. Continuing, Trump was further in news again after stating NATO allied troops avoided front lines in Afghanistan, which was hit back by Starmer and also our king, because we couldn't believe the statement that was coming out from Trump on this, and he then backpedaled and stated that NATO soldiers were real warriors. Don't bloody say stupid things like that, Trump. I mean, it's ridiculous. People's legs were blown off, arms blown off. They weren't sidestepping at all on Afghanistan. It's ridiculous. I didn't like that at all. When I heard it, just shows sometimes a little bit of Trump's brain on this. I really try and stay out of the wars in regards to Trump and Starmer and politics. Whether Trump is good or bad and all of that sort of stuff. We all have our own opinions. I just think sometimes he just doesn't have his brain in gear when he's talking. That's my big headache. But anyway, the last story was Storm Ingrid hit this week in the UK. It caused a collapse of Teignmouth's historic pier and the closure of Dawlish's railway line after a sea wall partially crumbled. And this is where I have to say, is everything in the UK listed now as crumbling? We've got roads with potholes, banks of rivers that are just turning into holes in the ground. The walls are collapsing, and we're a crumbling nature. It's entropy. It's everything is falling to bits, and yeah, we've got to stop the rot. Start putting some money into these things, and I don't know how we can do it, but that's because the rot has started a long time back with money going to big directors and all of this sort of stuff. This has got this money that's going to the wealthy needs to stop. You're not above a normal person who lives in this country. And if you live in this country, start putting back in. I think I do a good job in what I do, but it's nowhere near the money that's got by people way above me. And I wonder sometimes, what are you doing? What did you do more than I did? I did all the donkey work. You're getting all the praise and the money you get for this, especially in private sectors. I recognize talent, but I've got talent. Why is there a value on that? Yeah. Anyway, so that gets that out of the way. That's the news. We talk a little bit about me. And to be quite honest, there isn't too much to talk about. It's mostly doom and gloom. But doom and gloom outside of my family and myself's control. Let's talk a little bit, first of all, therefore, about my mum. Things continue to move in a continual forward approach in regards to mobility for my mum, and it pleases us all no end. Getting her out of bed still takes the same amount of time and getting her into bed. But when we ask her to move her legs, they seem a lot more freer, and we don't hear that, oh, it hurts and I can't do this. She'll still say no and can't a lot because that's the mind, not the body. But here's something that sort of knocks you back. So we were promised a call in regards to arranging a physiotherapist now that my mother's had her steroid injection in her knee. Did that call come through? No. When my sister told me they might phone my phone, I was on high alert in case I missed it. And I told her a day later, by the way, there was no call. And you could see the strain on my sister's face, and it's a strain on mine as well. But she went, bloody hell, what can we do about all of this? Why don't they take us seriously? Oh, I'll have to give them a call. It's the end of the week, so we'll have to do this at the beginning of next. And we've got to have a harder stance. And it caused a conversation I had today in regards to some of the stance parts that we need to put into that conversation when she phones up. And on the most part, my sister agreed. And it's all about getting another injection in my mother's other knee, because both knees are gone. The physio, and how long it's going to take before the physio arrives, because what you have to understand is when an injection is put in, you're on a timer. You're pretty much on a timer. How long will that injection work for? And if you've waited 4 weeks for them to even make a call to arrange it, and then when they try to arrange it, there's another 4 weeks, that means you're 8 weeks down the line. How much longer is it before she needs the next injection? And all of that time, nothing's happening with the other knee. And you've got to have both going, and you've got to have a physio that comes along and does both legs at the same time. Now, we'll take anything, one leg. Then when somebody comes and does that, we'll then extend it to both legs. And then we can ask those questions, exercises that you could do when you're lying horizontal rather than sitting up. So when she's in bed, some things that we could do, because you have to understand that my mother's back is stiff in the morning as well as the legs, because she's laid horizontal for a long period of time. Get her up too early, she sleeps during the day. Get her up later, she still sleeps during the day, but less so, and therefore she gets more tired towards the end of the evening and is more susceptible to going to bed. So all of this was sort of like discussed with my sister, and we were both in agreement that that phone call is going to be happening. But you can imagine these are the things that are causing problems. I've always put my own health behind. I had more health issues that I haven't talked about in my blog yet. And there's a specific reason for that. And that is, I haven't even had a consultation with my doctor on what it all means. And the first time that I am having that consultation is the 6th of February. And this was diagnosed to me by a text message at the end of September. And I went for tests in those first 3 months, but only 1 out of the 4 that I'm supposed to do. The others are still to be arranged. And I had a letter, right? This is the funny thing. I had a letter come through in regards to the second consultation in regards to my heart, because it's the 2nd year after the heart attack. And the letter came through, but I received 2 letters in the same day. The first one I opened said, you're going to have the consultation in April. The second one, when I opened it, said, forget all that, we've had to cancel it. What? So you send the letter out that says I'm having a consultation, and in the same breath you've cancelled it, and you think, send those both letters out to me. Why? They cancelled each other. Why didn't someone go, oh, that's been cancelled, the post hasn't gone yet, we'll retract that letter, right? You've just cost money using the franking machine or whatever machine that you use to post your letters out. You've sent 2 to me. One that tells me of an appointment, and one that says, forget all that, that appointment's cancelled. Same day. And I'm going, it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I know it was the same day because there's the franking machine stamp on it. I'm not daft. So these weren't on 2 separate days. They happened the same day. And the very nature of the fact that the second letter was sent out to cancel means that the first one was still there, you know, in a pending in tray or something, or in a bag or whatever it was, ready to go out. So ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I've got to get on top of some of my issues. And it's in my mind, and I will. My sister, I worry a little bit about as well. She's asthmatic, and she's got constant migraines at the moment. Totally exhausted, which I understand from somebody who's got high health problems. My sisters are maybe a little bit more seasonal, but nobody, regardless of whether you're getting on with someone or not, wants to hear that somebody is suffering. And so I'm very much a forget my pains, run around like a headless chicken trying to get jobs done that would take away from my sister getting further exhausted. That's just me. That's how I work. And I will continue to do that. You know, it's as simple as that. So that's a little bit about my mum. A little bit as well in regards to health and so forth. So really work has not been too much either. I've been on a roll, what they call projects and services. And if there's no projects for you to do, you emphasize on training. And training is difficult for me at the moment because of problems with my health at the moment that make it hard for me to concentrate. Plus everything that's going on around me is a distraction. But I raised a week before my training on a particular course I'm on from 13 to 25%. And when I got to Friday this week, it was at 60. All good news. Now, what happened was training is now high on the minds of our managers. Whether that's been caused by me, I don't know. Whether that's been caused by future things that are going on, like you have to have a minimum skill set to be in your job that you're in. That could be one reason. Whether that's going on, I don't know. But we were all asked to list the training that we've completed and where we are on the training, and then given a deadline of the end of March to all be at the same point, all of us. Now, that means that a lot of people have got a head start and I'm behind, and I therefore have to concentrate on the training, which I've said I've got some health issues that stop me from concentrating very well on specific things. I'm pretty sure they'll work with me on this, but I do know I'm on the back foot compared to others, and it's a concern for me. But I have the glass half full approach to think that work will recognise this and work with me. So I'm not looking too hard at this at the moment. We're not even at the end of January yet. Let's see where I am in mid-February and where the deadline really looms and where I'm at. So that's work, my mum, and a little bit about me with the health. I'll just add that this week, just like last week, I thanked my friend Steve for giving me a game called Bellwright. And it's a game that Rocket Bunny has been harking on about how good it is. And I purposely then did a thank you, Steve live stream. And I was asked on Wednesday during Ian Hill, the Rambling stream, when am I going to do the next one? And I said, well, I'm going to aim to try and do another one this weekend. And so Saturday came along. I waited as long as I could into my mother going to bed, but not so late that I can't go to bed and get a good night's sleep. Picked a time and did a stream, hoping that it didn't interfere with any of my friends. And I was on it for an hour and a half, and a lot of people were giving me tips. So obviously there's some people that have got this game, and I had a great time on it. The trouble is, I know that in the past, if I'd have been playing this, I'd have been playing this all day, and I can't do that. So in some ways it can make you feel a bit depressed, because you'd love to be able to do that, put some hours into things, but I'm really only available for a certain amount of time, and it also takes me away from doing content as well. So I'm going to try and do a series. I do like it, but I really want to get back to doing content. So there's a couple of other games that have been bought for me, and there's one from Jambon I definitely want to do a video on, because it's a very quick and dirty shoot 'em up type game, and it's in a genre which I love, which is twin shooter. And I've loaded it up, played one level, loved it, gone away, and I haven't gone back to it yet. And I really think that I should be saying thank you to my friend Jambon for another game that he just knew me so well that he knew that I'd love it. So I'm crap at it, if you want to take my first go on it as any measure. But it's one of those ones where I go, oh, this just makes me smile. This just makes me smile. This is what I need. Put this on, quick blast, going out with my mum. Do you see what I mean? Come back to it, have another quick blast, go back to my mum. And although my skill set would never increase doing it that way, I'd still have fun, and it'd be sort of like a pressure release for me. So there we go. That's everything to do with me. Done it all just over the 30 minutes, so I'm happy about that. I just need to do some stuff, because it's going to be a bit bitty, this particular blog. But I'll be back in under 5 minutes. And I've got all the rest of the blog to go. So won't be a moment. And I'm back. And almost forgot to say that last week I was just starting off with a bit of a sort of a bug that sort of left me snivelly. It's still there in a way, but all I'm now at is the fatigue. So last time it was the bug itself plus fatigue. Now it's just fatigue, and I'm pretty sure that by the time I get to, I don't know, Monday or Tuesday next week, with a couple of good nights sleep, going to bed early, waking up at the normal time, and getting a good 7 hours of sleep, that should go away. But at the moment, my sleep patterns are still like 5 hours or so. So if you see the fatigue start to coming at the end of the blog, that will explain an awful lot. But it's nowhere near as bad as it was the middle of last year, where we were in the start of my mother's ill health, the jobs that needed to be done, the extra work curriculums that were going on at work, which caused arguments and all sorts of stuff. It's not like that anymore. I think that might be more to do with strength and will than anything else. But just wanted to get that out the way, because you might see, a little bit of fatigue right at the end of the blog, depending on how long it is. So let's get cracking, shall we? And it's the shout outs next. And, I always say the same thing. Anybody that watches this, thank you. Thank you very much. it makes me feel wanted and needed. The numbers are always good, and the comments are always great. You know, always nice to read somebody making a comment for which I'm going to read out the names. But anybody that watches, it's great that you're just doing that, because you're getting an insight on struggles, you know, in much the same way that anybody that's in history that might look at this in the future, you know, looking back at this particular person's life, will understand some of the things that go on and may be able to form a plan that it won't happen to them, which means that's a good thing. And that was the whole point, really. So here's some names. Each and every single one of these have written a comment with questions and all sorts of stuff. And they are Denny, Steve's Gaming Part 2, Rocket Bunny, Polytronic Digital, which I've never heard of before, so thank you very much. Ian Hill, The Ramblings, Down the Rabbit Hole, Colin Jones, aka Ponder, Wee Bob Art, Martroid, and Carl Todd. And don't worry about names that you don't see or hear from, you know, that you see in the past. I'm sure they're watching. They're just very busy. They might not have anything to say. They might have something to say, but haven't got the time to write it down. All that sort of stuff. It's all recognizable, all not a problem to me. Me, I wish everyone well. That's how I am. I don't want anybody to feel what I've said or the fact that there's nothing there that I think terrible about it, because I don't. I've noticed myself me leaving less comments on other people's channels. I like them all and I click like, but you know, I haven't had the time to think constructively on something nice to say, and that's all down to time, just time, all the time. So let's move on and see what some people have said. And these are in no particular order, and I'll get a bit of water. So much better. And the first one is from Denny, my friend Denny. Wonderful, wonderful chap. Do need to get a phone call into him at some point. And he's put, "Hiya, mate. Well, another week has gone by as we're about to welcome February very soon. Why does time go so quickly these days? Question mark. Yeah, I've been asking that myself. So the big news coming out is a rebooted version of Blake 7. May the word may be written in the works. Firstly, you have to ask yourself if rebooting it is a valued option. Gareth Thomas left after Series 2, which changed the dynamic of the programme, with Avon hunting for Blake." Yeah, anybody that knows Blake 7 knows exactly what he's talking about there, which I do. "I really can't see an actor wanting to stay for a couple of series and move on in the lead role. Back then, it was done out of necessity. Secondly, there's only one name that springs to mind who could play the role of Avon, and that would be Andrew Scott. It's basically an impossible position to be in to cast. Seriously, who can play Servalan? Following the current televisional trends, it would be someone in drag." The right holders have the stench of the current Doctor Who series following them through. I've heard they had a hand in Andor, and that wasn't exactly bad for in-your-face preaching. This should be left alone and remembered for what it was. Leave the classics alone. Talking of Blake 7, I wonder when Series 3 will drop on Blu-ray. No sign of a trailer yet. Yeah, Blake 7 was big news to us that love science fiction and look and hear things about stuff coming back. And Blake 7 is one of those unusual ones because it ended It ended on a very bleak note, and one that has been debated for years and years and years on what actually happened. What does it all mean? And there have been talks on what the 5th season would look like if they ever did it. Some of the writers spoke out and said they had plans, but they never came into fruition, and so therefore plans are something like early ideas, which might totally change between the period of when it was broadcast end and when they were starting to produce the 5th and therefore start writing. As soon as it was cancelled, those ideas stopped there. Those ideas then turn into dust, don't they? When you talk about bringing something back, you wonder to yourself, are you going to do a continuation? Are you going to start from the very beginning and do a total sort of reimagination of something? A continuation probably wouldn't work because you'd have different actors, or you could say it's a totally different rebellion, because that's what it was. It was a rebellion against the Federation in this particular show. Very political in its nature, hidden behind writing that was quite inventive at the time. But each story had elements of what's going on in our lives right now, which all good storytelling, I think, tends to have in it. It's when you bring your own agenda in that I don't like, which is far too much of what's happened in Doctor Who. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, and it's the reason it may happen is because it's a snippet of a piece of broken information that you don't know is true or not. Time will tell, and I have the same trepidations really as my friend Denny has on all of this. But let's look. He continues. I watched the new Game of Thrones spin-off. Yeah, what's it called? The Night of the Game of Thrones or something. The Night of the Seven Kingdoms or something like that. It's a half an hour show. There's only about 6 episodes, so God knows how much you can tell of a story in this. Apparently it's set on a couple of books by R.R. Martin. He says that it will go on for 2 to 3 seasons and cover the books that this actually covers. I saw the first episode. Second episode is this Monday, but you can watch them all. So you can actually watch the lot if you've got Sky. Not with a catch-up service. It's just it's like many shows. They're not although they're showing it week by week. They do give you the ability to watch the whole lot in one go. And if you did, it'd be 3 hours of your life, which is next to nothing. So what did he put? I watched the new Game of Thrones spin-off and the Rats and Witches tale last night. Jesus, they were both absolutely atrocious. How does this absolute garbage get past the writers section? The acting and scripts were beyond juvenile. Have we come to the point of saturation and ideas with both programs? So yeah, he's talking about the Rats and Witches and the Game of Thrones spin-off. Now, I watched the first episode and I thought nothing of it. I went, what's this? Okay, I've watched the first episode. What did I think of it? Meh. Average. Should average be the new benchmark for a high point? No. Am I going to watch the next episode? Yeah, it's part of Game of Thrones. I do enjoy the dragons 2 seasons, which is much more in line with how the original Game of Thrones came about. This half an hour thing, It seems like it's almost like a pocket universe. It's set 100 years before Game of Thrones. It's set, I think, 100 years after the Dragons saga. So it's slap bang in the middle of two particular points. How much impact does this have? No idea. You wouldn't know from that first episode. So I reserve judgment until I've seen them all. I will see them all because it's Game of Thrones, just like I would see anything if it was The Last of Us, say, where I really enjoyed the first season. And so, the second season was pretty strong. I could see cracks appearing, though. So, yeah, my thoughts are you've got to give something a try. You've got to give something a go. But I've got a funny feeling this one will be a ripple left behind from somebody skimming a stone across a lake. That's how I look at it. It's going to be a nothing. And from that point of view, shouldn't be made. Shouldn't be made. Yeah, I'm agreeing a little bit there with Denny. He continues, have you seen the new He-Man and the Masters of the Universe trailer? Again, the dreadful acting, humour, and yes, the preaching is back. So it's hard. A hard no when it finally drops. The main actor is the wrong choice. Skeletor is visually excellent, though. Yeah, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, a cartoon show I loved. I love the theme tune. My God, the theme tune, it's playing in my head right now. And I think it's synonymous on why I like the show so much, because I really wanted to listen to the soundtrack to it, and I was intrigued on what battle would be happening this week. And I watched for a time the new cartoon and didn't think much of it. It didn't have that same sound, and I think part and parcel of something that you have to hold on to, I think, is the essence of what the show is, and the sound and the look. So yeah, this trailer, I haven't seen the trailer. I was told the trailer was dropping during my time on the Ian Hill, the Ramblings. So yes, I was aware of it, but I mentioned there and then to Ian and everybody that was watching, I don't watch many trailers because I want to go in blind. I want to go in not knowing what the trailer looked like. I do think that sometimes trailers give away too much. Others give away so little, they're nothing like the film that you're going to go and see. So I don't want to raise any expectation on it, so I don't feel the need or the rush to go and see the trailer. Just like I've seen very little on the Spider-Man Brand New Day film, which drops also in the summer of this year. Spider-Man, as you know, is one of those characters for me that I have high expectations, and I'm not easily pleased, and so I'm very, very critical of seeing what they do with Spider-Man. So do I want my past of my feelings on He-Man and even the film that came out that was awful at the time, canon, and Dolph Lundgren's take on Masters of the Universe was nothing like the cartoon. But when it's on TV, I watch it. It's one of those things. It just takes me back to that time where I was deliberating at a very early part of my life on just how bad something was, rather than the grumpiness you get from me when I watch and think of my past. So, yeah, I'm watching that story very, very closely at the moment. He continues, in a couple of weeks, my team at work, which is 4 of us, are going to Retro Realm in Warsaw. Hopefully, I can feed back some videos and pictures on Discord. That sounds great. I'm not sure how far Warsaw is from me. I doubt I could go. But yeah, I love it when I hear that people are looking forward to something. That's what I think of when somebody mentions something like that. But I can get a bit jealous. Wish I could do something like that. So continuing. So my question for this week, remembering the end of Blake 7 when Avon shot Blake and the Federation shot the Scorpio crew, how would you imagine or how would you have liked for it to continue if they had brought it back? Wow. That's a difficult one. I do know Big Finish did a story immediately after the aftermaths of the closing story of the 4th season, which ended the series with everybody being shot. And it was an interesting take. I think it's called Afterlife. It's by Big Finish. I haven't listened to it again from the initial listening to it, but I remember having a good time with it. I think you have to look. I think the speculation that was going on was that Blake was a clone or something, that everybody was shot down, but they were stunned rather than shot. Avon, in his closing image, which is him smiling, and then going black, and all you hear was the shots, means it's ambiguous at best what happened to him. We think he was killed. But they could have shot his arm off. They could have stunned him. Could have been anything. We know in the story that they were high on trying to get the Liberator's crew and the Scorpio crew alive so that they could be tried and possibly killed later on. So would they want them to be outrightly shot at the point that they were, or was there things in place that meant that they could still be tried and they'd still be alive? At this particular point, we fought death because they wouldn't want this to continue for years and years. It would be eating into the budget, wouldn't it, of the Federation themselves. So, yeah, it's an interesting tale and one that's difficult for me to answer, other than I think I could go along with the clone part. I think that the Big Finish gave an interesting point of view on it. Anybody that hasn't seen it, please go and watch Blake 7, all 4 seasons. And because it's classic television. And each of you have your own imagination on how you might have continued that last story. That's what I'm being asked. So do that yourself. I hope I've given a good answer. The last closing comment is, pass on my best to your mother. Look after yourself. Let's see if we can catch up this week. And I agree. That'd be brilliant. Now, I'm just going to go and splash my face a little minute. I can feel all of the thoughts in there as taking some things away. I'll be back, honestly, very, very quickly. Now, I've been gone for seconds. I've got myself another water just in case I need to go, although I've got some left. And I've got some little nibbles here because I missed breakfast. I had a banana, but that's it. Didn't have any toast or anything. So that could be another reason for a bit of fatigue. So I'm going to continue as best as I can. And we get to, salute to my friend Denny. We get to Steve's Gaming, my friend Steve, who I mentioned earlier, who bought me a game. Such a nice guy, thinking about me and trying to occupy my mind when I do get the time to do something. Absolutely lovely. Now, he's put, hi Del, dropping a comment here, Saturday, 12:40 p.m. Not sure if it'll stay, as YouTube likes to delete my comments, and I'm getting sick to the sick to the back teeth of it. Great blog as usual, and I hope you and your mum had a decent and stress-free week. Yeah, I've already read that out now, so I think it's becoming a little bit better, and I can understand your frustration. You write a comment like you're doing now, it goes missing. You have to write it in 2 places, put it here, put it also personally to me to read out. It's a mess, and I have no idea whether some of the people that I'm not mentioning that have leaving comments have actually done that, and it's been taken away. It could explain an awful lot, but I try not to think about it too much. I know that everybody out there has got thoughts when they're watching my and listening to my blog. So thank you so much for all the kind words. You continue, I visited my mum last night, and sadly I can see she's declining, and it pains me so much to see it. However, my stepdad is doing a superb job of taking care of her. By the way, did you hear Mango Mussolini on the TV insulting our brave soldiers? Yes, mentioned it earlier. I was furious about that. Daft dodging cowardly tosser. Oh, by the way, I'm really looking forward to the Tremis 2 launch. It's been far too long since we've been to the moon. In my opinion, the space shuttle was a bad move and held us back. Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? What they called the space shuttle the flying brick. It was functional at best, an idea that was very early of a reusable craft, and to be quite honest, it was just a terrible design. It was heavy for a start, and that's one of the problems. Its wings weren't big enough, but it had to go into our atmosphere. It's a tricky one. They've now come up with another solution for reusable. Probably a much better idea as well. A different craft or a way of landing when you enter our atmosphere, but the reusable part is the bit that's in space. Probably a better idea. And they've got, I think the window is open until into the second week of February, so it's not too far now, and I'll be watching that. That'll be great. Okay, ramble over, you continue. On with the question, which is a bit of a weird one today. What is the most embarrassing thing you've ever worn? Okay, I'm done. All the best, mate, and give my love to your mum, which you know I will. Embarrassing stuff I've worn. Well, that's obvious because I've mentioned it before, Steve. I went to a live production of the Rocky Horror Picture Show when I was up in Manchester very early on. I think it was like 1998, 1999. It could have been around those points. And I dressed up as Frankenfurter. So I had a basque on and stockings and makeup and a wig. I've got pictures of it somewhere. I've always turned around and said, they ain't going to be displayed. A different time of my life, one where I didn't care what other people thought too much. And I had a great night, and it'll always be in my memory as being a great night. But it was definitely embarrassing. So that makes me smile just thinking about that. Thank you so much, Steve. Salute to you. I hope that gives you a good answer to that. Moving on, we get to my friend Rocket Bunny. Salute to Steve. Keep looking at his channel, by the way. I'll talk about him a little bit later on. So Rocket Bunny has put, hi Del, nice to hear. I'm going to make the text a bit bigger. Oh, that's a bit better. Hi Del, nice to hear you and your mum have had a better week. I won't have a bad word said against cheese and pickle crackers or sandwiches. Sometimes the old combos are the best, although I admit to enjoying cheese and Marmite even more these days. Your talk of having various consoles in storage made me remember that I have my Commodore 64, Amiga 500 and Speccy from the 80s up in the loft. Most have been there for 25 plus years, so I'm under no illusion that they will be subject to the elements and long past working. I did bring down my smaller LED games a few years ago. I was surprised that my Galaxy Intruder 1000 and Frogger still work fine, but I did feel sad my first one, Demon Driver, has stopped working. And you know what? That could be just corrosion. You need to have a little look at that. I've seen a lot of restorations and they all point to that. So that's good. I think I have slightly different attitude to retro gaming despite being in the same age range as most of your viewers and community. I've always been perfectly happy using my PC to emulate all the old platforms. When I got my new one a few years ago, I spent a week or so installing all the emulators into each into RetroArch, including all the relevant shaders and bezels. I prefer the convenience of having them in one platform that I can easily fire up to give me my fix. The only extra hardware I sometimes use are an arcade stick with a decent with the decent switches, a USB Kempston style microswitch joystick for the 8 bits, and even a 2600 emulator, which is a bit crap compared to today's standards. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I'm 8 years old again, playing co-op, Space Invaders or Pac-Man with my next door neighbour in his house in 1979. Very fun times. Anyways, question this week. So I read that out a bit bitty, but I think I know what he was getting at. Hopefully you read between the lines as well. Don't want to read that out again, but he's got to the question now, and he's put, any thoughts? Have you been watching any of the 2026 Formula One cars that have been presented this week? Any thoughts on the new regs and the designs? Next week, the private testing starts in Catalonia. Personally, I like the look of items a lot, with the exception of the silly barge boards on the side. Yeah, that's where they can step on the side and get into the cockpit of the car. You've said any thoughts of the new regs and designs? Next week is the private testing from Catalonia. Personally, I like the look of them a bit, with the exception of the silly barge boards and the side which are going to break with the slightest touch. I like the new front wings, which seem to have a passing resemblance to those used in the mid-2000s. All the best to you and your mum. Take care. Hope to see some new videos from you soon. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I have watched a few F1 shows about the new regulations more than anything. I did watch a couple of the car displays. One was Ferrari, one was Mercedes, I think. Mercedes looks strong. Ferrari, less so. But that might be for a number of reasons. So it's not necessarily one for me to speculate on. But I am looking forward to it. I do know that many of the manufacturers have changed the front end. We know that it goes deeper than that, so I'll hold back on it. But Ferrari haven't got off to a great start, but they pointed out they were at a different type of press conference about their cars, where they could only go around the track 4 times. Others have done a bigger start of the season racing program. So it's interesting to know how that's going to pan out. So that's the end of Rocket Bunny, and salute, my friend, and thank you very much. And I'll be back in a moment. And I just want to say to Steve, thanks very much for those comments. Absolutely marvelous. I've mentioned about me dressing up for the Rocky Horror Picture Show a couple of times, and each time it brings back a smile to my face. So that's absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to say salute to my friend. Hope he's enjoying those 2 live streams that I've done. I will try and do a series out of that, and we'll move on to the next one, which is a guy. It looks like a picture of a guy anyway, from the picture, and it says Polytronic Digital, and he just put one line. It didn't make much sense to me. Maybe it makes sense to you. It says, wait, comma, 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 comma. Have you green screened this? Now I read out the comments that are presented to me, and I didn't quite get what that meant, because my blog has never been green screened. You're seeing what my room looks like, which is always a mess and needs to be addressed. It has done for many years. But the only time I don't have a green screen, by the way, I don't have a wireframe with a green cloth that you can then genlock and put another image there in its place. There are many of my friends that do that, and it's certainly something that I'd love to do, but where would you put it? I mean, there's hardly any room behind me. I mean, I can stretch out my hand and I'm nearly touching, this particular device here. There we are. Look, I'm touching it now. That's how much space there is, next to nothing. So I do use something called NVIDIA Broadcast that puts an image behind you, but you then see the tears because it's not particularly great. So I'm not quite, and I've done that with my short films and short games series. And when I'm going as well to Ian Hill, the Ramblings live stream, which, by the way, is a wonderful stream I do on a Wednesday. Definitely something that you need to look at, not only just for his content, but we have a great time on Wednesdays. I always look forward to it, but it's the only time that I use that piece of software. So I'm not quite sure what that means, but thank you very much for your comment anyway. Hopefully that you're enjoying, the information that's in this, and we'll move on. And lo and behold, the next one is Ian Hill, the Ramblings, who I've just said is a great supporter of me. He does a fantastic amount of content each week. I don't know how he gets it out. I mean, I know that I work, and I'm a carer, but he also has a son and has a lot of medical conditions, and he still gets past those barriers and does such great stuff. And on a Wednesday, we do our live, and we're up to, I think, episode 91, is it? We're rapidly approaching the 100th week of doing it. I don't think we've missed a week. If we have, it might be just one, when there was an illness involved. So definitely a lot of content for you to backtrack on if you're into looking at archives of people's great work. Plus, look at the content that's out there right now on his channel. Each week there's, I don't know quite how many there is. 7, 8, 9, 10. Must be 12, 13 things every week of various lengths. Anyway, let's see how he starts. I might need some more water, actually. He's put, "Hi, Del Boy. Hope you and your mum are okay and having a week that goes by without any problems or drama. Things being quiet is good. It gives you a chance to take a breather and not feel those intense moments of stress. Yeah, I think Monday was a problem for me for no reason that I need to present in here, but that was quite stressful. But the rest of the week, no issues whatsoever. Just it's been the norm, really. The road outside is closed for 2 weeks. So far, I've not heard any road works taking place. Maybe it will be next week. I'm enjoying the piece, though to be honest, it's not as busy as it was a few years ago. We had a lot of lorries going by. Now they are building some houses very near, and I've not heard much noise. I hope the new residents will not be too bad. Still feeling cold a lot of the time, but wrapping myself up with blankets. The worst thing is every night I go to bed is cold, but I warm up under the duvet. I fall asleep and then 3 or 4 hours later I wake up very hot and sweating. This stems from the diabetes, and also I have to sleep with my back against the headboard because of my diabetes. It helps keep my chest clear. I remember when I was in my late teens thinking, why do old folk talk about their health so much? Well, now I'm doing that and thinking about it too. Maybe it's just the way we are. The older you get, the more you think about your own morality. Yes, that's definitely something that is happening with me. I think I've made that perfectly clear in my blogs. And I even think sometimes when my mother is gone, what is there left? Is there a legacy for me to move forward with? Is the future something that I want to even be participating in? It's not something where, anybody should be concerned with. They're just natural things when you're talking and thinking about your own morality. I know there is a life after when my mother goes, but when you don't have a girlfriend, when you don't have a wife, when you don't have children, when you've got conflicts that make you think about where you even think in position of what your family think about you, when you think about whether you'll even be in the family home that I'm in my 50s and there's only 7 years of my life. No, 8 years of my life that I've not been living in the family home. And when you've got other family members that aren't in that way, they've got their own homes, and they've therefore in their mind set up that new home, but your old way of looking at life is being taken away. That's you thinking of your own morality, and you're thinking, do I in my pension years want to start again? No. If I was in my 40s, I'd have a fighting chance. Where I'm at now, no. And so I don't want to start again in a different house, in a different garden, nothing to look forward to, just bills to pay. I'm much happier being where I'm at and thinking about the garden that I've always maintained. So yeah, it is on my mind, and has been for 20 odd years, knowing that this moment might turn up. But anyway, watched quite a lot of films. I must say this is Ian continuing. He's watched quite a lot of films. I must say a big thank you for sending me the first 4 episodes of Pluribus. That's a new science fiction show that we're both watching. It's on Apple TV and won't get a physical media release, though we can hope things might change. This is a quality sci-fi series, a great take on the theme of alien invasion. It's interesting to see these aliens being nice and benevolent, and how it becomes sinister. This kind of writing makes me wish Doctor Who and Star Trek had that. Hopefully things in the future will change. It's good news. Kurtzman and Russell T. David are leaving. Yes. In terms of films, I've enjoyed watching a few. Actor Stanley Baker in Hell Drivers and The Criminal, all before he gained attention in Zulu in 1964. Films in the 50s and 60s are just full of nostalgia for me, seeing how things looked and the fashions of the characters. I also enjoyed Revolver, a 1973 film, a European financed and setting for Oliver Reed. It was a crime action thriller with a great soundtrack by Morricone. Yes, I'm aware of the Morricone soundtrack. Yes, I actually noticed it, which doesn't often happen. How you could miss a Morricone soundtrack, I don't know. He is quite diverse, and with his styles, instrument-wise, very much so. Anybody that's listened to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, A Few Dollars More, A Fistful of Dollars, Once Upon a Time in the West, and a lot of Italian noir films, you'll notice how he tried to bring something new, fresh into something. So it's good that he listened to it. That's marvellous. Maybe I'm having an influence on him. Who knows? You never know. He might start listening to Jerry Goldsmith. That's an in-joke between us and the people that watch us on a Wednesday. So my question this week is, why do you think Britain never feels fully part of Europe? That's an interesting question. Yet our history shows we played a big part in influencing the formation of these nation states. Interesting. Yeah, history, yeah. I think part of it, and this is just me and my opinion, because he's asked my opinion, is we feel closer to nations where English is their natural first language. I think that's part of it. Language does have cadence in this instance. I think that's true. The sea between us and the coasts of Europe make us feel isolated. Yeah, I'd go along with my thoughts and feelings on that. We were always invaded. We kept to ourselves. And when we went out and prospered, we didn't really do too much other than France and Spain, in particular. And we'd branch out and go out to the Americas, and even later on Australia. We had major battles and we wanted to control France, but it's about the only thing, really. You know, I do feel that the sea between our coasts of Europe makes us feel isolated because we are definitely separate. I know that my dad and I had a feeling when we were part of the European Union and all of our prime ministers went over to discuss legislation for us being in the European Union, that we weren't listened to. I think that they heard us, but they already had a foregoing plan that anything that we were going to say didn't matter. Didn't matter. Who cares? So that has a bearing, I think, on isolation as well. So that's there. And I think our own history works against us in regards to collaboration. As much as we were pioneers, we used the sea to our advantage. We conquered and we set up trade deals. Whenever you watch something, you know, like the Eurovision Song Contest, politics always, and I don't care what anybody says in regards to this, politics comes into it. We were winning. We got some good songs out there. We didn't win every year, but we were always high up. Our songs were there. And then all of a sudden, we were bottom. And we've been bottom for a long time. I think there's only been one occurrence where two occurrences where we've been in the top 10. The rest have been 0 points, which has happened a couple of times, or in the bottom 10. And other nations have been much more acceptable. and many people can have their own opinion on the Eurovision Song Contest. I don't look at it anymore, but I look back at the 80s more than anything, and the 70s of the Eurovision Song Contest, when it was fun. And now it's a big spectacle. Yeah, I think it was 1987 when we last won it, and we had won it 5 times in the 15 or 20 years before that, and nothing from 87 onwards. Yeah, that's poor, isn't it? That's bad. You can see the political shift. It's one of those things where when I think about Europe and I think about the European Cup, even what's happening in the fans, the fight, sometimes fighting breaks out, all that sort of stuff. You can always put it down to football's always been like that, but you watch matches week in, week out that are just between ourselves, and it seems to be calmer waters. You'll notice that certain nations have even been banned because of the outrage that they've caused at the matches, shouting out racial slurs and stuff like that. So yeah, collaboration seems to be something that's not there. So more isolation. I think that's my answer to that. I won't go any deeper than that, other than salute, my friend. And hopefully people don't take my opinion too strongly with that. But that's just how I feel. And, you know, there's nothing more I can say on it, really. So salute, my friend, and we move to a very good friend of mine who comments on occasion. I love his channel. I talk about it all the time. So Down the Rabbit Hole. And he's put, awesome stuff as always, Del. If I lived closer, I would offer you a dram out of that Blade Runner bottle, as it's glorious. Yeah, and I'd have had a bit with it as well. And then I'd have been bringing out some of my old whiskey that maybe you'd like. But anyway, you mentioned Bahrain darts earlier. That's right, because my mum was watching it. And I wonder what thoughts you have about Saudi Arabia investing so much in Western game companies lately, like Electronic Arts. Yeah, that was big in the news in the last couple of weeks. I think it's a figure of 55 million or billion, 55 something or other, buying out Electronic Arts. Electronic Arts was always a big company and a big name for me during my 8-bit era, and even into some PC games. What they've done is they've bought the company outright, I think. And apparently there's a strategy, because I was watching some YouTube channels on this in the last 2 weeks, but haven't sort of like mentioned it because it was all sort of speculation, but it's come to fruition now. But apparently the strategy is towards money, of course, and competitive gaming, you know, e-gaming. Now, they're pulling out everything and moving all of the talent that wrote the games for Electronic Arts into gaming, where it's all around e-gaming. So that's first-person shooters where somebody wins, or real-time strategies where you're in a LAN party type situation and you fight and somebody wins. And they're all looking at those types of games because that's where the money is. I don't have a good thing to say about that. I've never been into e-gaming. I've never sat down really and watched an e-gaming tournament all the way through, although I've watched the odd one to see what they're all talking about. But I've never watched a tournament, say. So my opinion on that is, what a load of bollocks, really. And I don't think much about it at all. Then you go on, and I guess that also leads into, what are your thoughts on Meta? That's the people who make my VR headset here. dropping 4 VR gaming studios and moving on to wearable tech instead of VR now. And that's an interesting one. That's been being debated for a while. VR type eyewear, wearable tech. And the fact that Meta are closing down 4 major studios that have made them a great amount of money. One of them is one of my favorite games on the VR, totally, which is Asgard's Wrath 2. It came with my new headset, and I played that for hours and hours, and it made me go, wow, this is what VR is. They've closed that studio down. 3 other major studios that made them some great games. And it's 10% of their workforce. And at the same time, nobody is talking about where the Oculus 4, the Meta 4 is, when it's coming out, what features it's going to have. They're talking about glasses that incorporate tech. And that's been talked about for years. And Apple have come out with some glasses and all of that. They cost about $3,000. And Meta will be trying to cost cut that and bring out something more in our price bracket, even if we consider £600 a pipe dream, like I do right now. I really gasp at it. That they obviously are moving into games not like what those studios were producing, and doing more things like Beat Saber, which make them money. Beat Saber being a rhythm game means that you're using VR in a unique way, and you're slicing and blocking away at these things that are flying at you, at the point of music being pumped at you, which you can pay for extra. And then there's all the rhythm games for exercise, boxing, and all of that sort of stuff. And that means that games go on a back burner into more what you can do in snippets of time for yourself, because your exercise regime will probably be about an hour, which is pretty much the same sort of time as the battery lasts. Funny that. So, yeah, I'm not in favour of it. I feel it's a backward step for VR. Some other people are speculating it's not a backward step. Maybe that wearable tech will become the new VR headset. I don't see that, but I'm probably a bit more closed-minded on this. So we'll go on to your last question. Finally, can you describe why you like Interstellar so much? I watched it and was not impressed, but I know people love that movie, so I'd like to know why. It's pretty easy for me, because it's anybody that's sort of like watched any of my sort of like movie shorts or listened to me and Denny talking know that we like our dystopian films, and Interstellar is a dystopian film. No word about it. It's about a disease affecting our planet, how we continue our legacy as a human race on another planet, for which they find themselves discovering a black hole near Saturn that we could possibly get to, go through that black hole and find a planet similar to what we're on at the moment and continue our legacy. Rather than think about the plan, although this is discussed in the film, on how we can address the matter of what's causing our own extinction in this particular instance, the poverty of food going away. We've had it's a wheat blight, I think, if I remember rightly. Now, I love my dystopian films. I also think that it's very close. It scratches that itch for me on some of my films that I've really enjoyed, which is 2001: A Space Oddity in particular, Contact, that's one, The Martian, that's a definite one that it's sort of like. And the science in it makes sense to me. But do I like the plans, plan A and plan B, in the film? No, I don't. But it's the only downside to what I think is an exceptional film that made me think. And any film that makes me think and continuously makes me think as we move forward in our own real lives, I wonder to ourselves, are we doing enough? And if I'm thinking that way now, then I'm thinking that way to the future where it might possibly happen. We have had a food famine in the last 90 to 100 years, and we haven't addressed the question yet, what are we going to do? So I think that's it for me on that one. That was quite an easy one. So you continue, keep up the good work and say hello to your mum for me, and you know I will. The amount of hellos I have to say, it's no wonder that Sunday goes so quick for me. It takes so much time. So I got rid of that water and I'm on to the next now. And we move on to my friend Wee Bob Art. Love Wee Bob Art. You want to see his channel. If you want interested in drawing, go and have a look at that. But he's not just about digital drawing. He does film stuff. And I'm really looking forward to that. He's just doing some work at home at the moment. So that'll be along shortly. And he's put, as always, this is from Wee Bob Art, as always, enjoyed listening along. As a recommendation, I would give Rental Family a watch. There are a lot of subtitles required for the movie, which I don't mind. I really enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed Tron. He actually enjoyed Tron Ares. There definitely could have been improvements, but the concept, although is a giant 3D printer, actually rings true of possibilities. If AI was to be allowed to develop and operate 3D printers, they definitely could also do the programming of such physical materials. After all, integrated circuits are just made of a different base material. My main complaint about the movie was the baddies. I think they could have been a whole lot more sinister. I'd agree with that. I wasn't enamored by Tron Ares, though, because I much prefer the legacy aspect of going back in and seeing how Flint is doing and the rest, rather than Tron coming out of the enclosure and living in our real life. That seemed a cop-out to me, seemed easy, seemed keeping cost cuts down, because it would have been harder to generate the world inside than it is outside. I may be talking out my arse on that, but that's what I think. So, yeah. You continue. Anyway, I've been watching a new series called From. It is from the creators of Lost, which I'm led to believe. The basic premise is a town exists that traps people, and they must be inside at night due to monsters, vampire type creatures. They come out at night and ask to be invited in. It is really great so far, and I'm hoping it doesn't lose its way like Lost did. No pun intended. Are there any shows which you have watched that either lose their way or were cancelled before the conclusion? Oh my God, so many. It could be movies, which is much more rare, but Divergent is a major movie that was cancelled before the concluded the final film. Yeah, so there's lots, I suppose. We could go down the route of Heroes, Dexter, Walking Dead. I think we all know, Game of Thrones in particular. Game of Thrones has a terrible ending. Dexter's ending was bad twice over, because it came back and was even worse the second time they cancelled it. Walking Dead became synonymous with a pattern. You moved into a new area, you set up your base, you got along with the people that owned the base in the first place, or the area that they've just moved into, fell out with them, killed them off, went on ad infinitum, and so therefore the series became very formulatic. And Heroes was just bad from season 2 onwards. They'd got traction with season 1. It was listed and touted as being the best thing since sliced bread. But by the time I got to season 2 and season 3, I'd lost interest. It was rinse and repeat on a grand scale. By the time we get to 6 and 7, and I'm now watching and far less, then yeah, it turned into something that pitted out. So let's hope that doesn't happen for The Last of Us. Let's hope it doesn't happen for The House of Dragon. I've got a funny feeling it probably will. History seems to dictate that. But there we go. With that one, and salute, my friend. Like I say, be back in a moment. So salute to my friend Wee Bob Art. I'm just looking to see. Yeah, I think I've answered it. Are there any shows that lost their way? And it's Heroes yet for definite. So that's a definite. Walking Dead, you know, lost its way, as he said. So definitely that. And please go and support him. His channel's brilliant, and Down the Rabbit Hole, absolutely fantastic channels. I mentioned those at the end of this blog. You know, what I've watched of theirs. And we moved to Carl Todd. Love Carl Todd. He comes back every week, and I like usually what he's asked me, because they're sometimes very left field. So that's really good, isn't it? And he's put, "Hi Del, cutting it close this week, since it was another hectic week at work, and I've got a cold." I've had that. Do you know what I mean? It's weird how it's going around. I hope that your week went well. Last week you mentioned that you hadn't been back to Manchester in many years. I think you would notice a lot of changes, especially in the city centre. I lived in the city centre quite close to Umist for many years before emigrating. I tried to go back to the UK at least every other year, and I always try to catch up with friends in Manchester. It's always noticeable on how much it's changed. You could be walking along in an area you know and recognise everything, but then you turn a corner and so much of it has changed. Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I miss some of that. I have to say that I didn't go into the centre of Manchester as much as I'd have liked to have done. I never had any money, and I always thought to myself, what would I find going by myself? So when I did go, I went with friends and went with my parents, but we mostly went to the big, massive shopping mall called the Trafford Centre, which is the same sort of name as what's in the centre of Manchester, and went around there because my mum loved her shopping. Much easier to get around, much easier as well to get to. But I did go into the centre of Manchester for the nightlife on occasion, and I did go shopping in the centre there on several occasions, especially with my girlfriend at the time, who then explained to me about the bombing that went on because they blew up a major shopping shop that was there, and the scaffolding was still around it. And of course, I wanted to see what the hacienda was, because I remember going up there sometimes just on a day to do some work for work, but I'd have to go back the same night. And sometimes, because I knew friends, they said, let's go to the hacienda, and I'd travel back in the morning to go to work. Because it is only really a couple of hours. You could set off at 5 and you could be at work for 9 o'clock. So that was easy to do. But yeah, what would it be like with most of my time being around girlfriends, and the house that I lived in was Northern Moor, but I also lived in Didsbury. Didsbury was a lovely area, But Didsbury was where two of my girlfriends were. And I wonder if the shop that I helped work in is still there and whether I'd be well received. I do know that the father, who I worked with quite a lot when I was going out with his daughters, he'd had major heart surgery. I mean, we're talking about cutting into his chest, massaging his heart, whether he's still alive, and what happened to that family. Yeah, lots and lots of questions, in my head. But you've got some questions yourself, so let's see what you put. You also talked about Defender of the Crown on the Amiga. I wonder if you've ever tried the enhanced CD32 version, which you could play with emulation. Yes, I have. There is some differences, but not enough. They changed the music, obviously, because it's CD quality. Some of the graphics were changed, but they didn't put any of the enhancements that they should have done in. And of course, I played Defender of the Crown 2 on the Xbox, the original Xbox, not the Xbox 360, the Xbox, and it was really weird. I remember in one of the sort of, because it was more a mini game type thing. You took over territory like you did in Defender of the Crown, but I remember this one mini game. You're in a tree, and you've got merchants, and the crown going along this road, and you could see all aspects of it. So you could turn your arrow around, and you followed it around, and you had to kill with your arrows people that were on the carriage and the horsemen. That was interesting. So it sort of like fits in time with the mini games that were in the original Defender of the Crown, with the jousting and the raiding and all that sort of stuff. But it didn't get very good reviews, and I think that was the end of Defender of the Crown. But I've not played all of them. I was quite surprised to see how poor really the PC version was, but it was released at a time where you were playing with EGA graphics. But you'd have thought that they'd have enhanced it, and I think they did come out with a CD version much later on, but you can't get it to run very well, if I remember rightly, under emulation. You'd have to, it works so much better if you've got a 95 or a 90 Windows 98 machine. But I must remember that Exodos has done a Windows 95 set, and I don't know if Defender of the Crown CD is in there. I'll have to check. That's very interesting. You then continue. Did you receive all of your Doctor Who replacement discs? I'm still waiting, but I will chase up at the end of the month if nothing arrives. I really wish the BBC would actually reply to people when you send a request for a replacement. And it's funny you mention that, because the last time I reported on this, I did state I've got 2 replacement programs going on. That's season 18 and season 20. And season 18, they've sent me the disc, right? The replacement disc. 20, I'm still waiting on. And the last email I got said my season 18 had been sent, season 20, but we're evaluating when we're going to be pushing the season 20 discs out. So I'm still waiting. Yes, matey, I'm still with you. And I haven't sent a reminder to them, even though it's been 5 weeks since I got that disc. I just took it that it's going to happen. But I always have that nagging feeling that after 5 weeks, I've been forgotten. So I will have to do that. So you've put, as always, best wishes to you and your mum, and thank you very much. You know that that's going to be going to my mum. And thank you very much as ever for always writing a comment when you've got very little time. Thank you. Moving on now to another big friend of mine, Martroid. Always love reading out his comments. He's put, Dell, I honestly crack up at how many people stash their original computers and consoles in a closet so they can use minis and misters instead. I mean, I get it. If you're a YouTuber or a streamer, or you just don't have the space, it totally makes sense. But me, I want to squeeze every last bit of joy out of the real hardware while it's still alive and kicking. Does that make me nuts? Probably, but like in a charming way. There's no right or wrong here, of course, just one of those fun retro nerd philosophy debates. And yeah, and I looked at it as a little bit as of a debate. And my only answer is I just don't have the space. And it is a proper answer to it. I will say this. If I had the space, I would be on the original hardware. No doubts about it. Because I don't. I go as close as I possibly can, which is where my Mister comes in. When I used to do everything on my PC and under emulation, that's now a very big back burner for me. The Mister has took over. And that particular way of looking at emulation, because it's not really emulation, it's at a hardware level, is as close as darn it to having it. I don't think anybody can turn around and say they've got the money to have and the room to put all arcade machines. Say I wanted to bring arcade machines in here and I'd have an Outrun cabinet and a Gallagher cabinet and a Berserk cabinet and a Robotron cabinet and a Star Wars sit-down booth and all of that. I'd run out of space. You'd need an arcade shop to do that. Yes, you could have the odd couple, but at some point you'll come and say, I could do this in a MAME cabinet, and then emulation comes in. So yeah. Horses for courses, whichever way you look at it. But I will say this. Ever have I got an opportunity to go onto the original hardware, I do it. Simple as that. End of answer. So fantastic. And salute, my friend. Thank you so much. Can't wait for you next week. So we move on to my next great friend, Colin Jones, a.k.a. Ponder, who's got 2 channels. And you must go to his channels. He does a blog. And he does a high score kerfuffle. No end of them. He does a 64 one. He does a Mainmeister one. He does an arcade one. He does... and they're all playing these different games. And it forces him to sit down and play games, try and get a high score, and see who wins in usually a 2-week period. It gives you time to get used to it and start getting some scores together. And he streams those attempts. So even better. Go and have a look. Link is in the description along with a lot of other stuff. He's put, an unremarkable week in this day and age is a blessed relief. Let's hope this continues. Yes, thanks very much, matey. The thing about tariffs is it's the American people who end up paying into the US Treasury coffers. Yeah, that's true. I'm not going ooh about pickle on cheese. Bloody lovely mum. Good to hear your mum's mobility is improving. Sending my regards as always. Not a problem. Thank you. No sound issues so far in this blog. It might be fixed. I've got a funny feeling that I might have slightly knocked it on the head with the gain control. But I remember now, and it takes me time to remember, that when I was setting up OBS the first time, I put in what my microphone was and saw a guy on YouTube saying, these are the best settings that you use with filters. And I haven't set those up. And what that basically means is OBS has set those up, but Logitech's G Hub itself also needs to have some tweaks done. And I've done nothing there. And that could be the reason. So I'm not saying I'm out the Maya yet. I think there's still work for me to do, but not much. I got no notifications for your comment response regarding OBS. Don't know why that is. Grid Trap is a port of Checkman, which I have played in the arcade, or corner shop, or chip shop, or you get the picture. Yes, and I know that it's Checkman. We had a discussion about this when I first mentioned it in another stream. I think it was with Alan of Mainmeister. It doesn't take away the fact that I love Grid Trap. Grid Trap's absolutely brilliant. I love Grid Trap. You continue. I could never get into Defender of the Crown. Never won a castle raid fight. Never survived a joust. The strategy part was fine, but the action parts I found unplayable. They did look gorgeous though, and that's a shame because I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I chose a noble that was good at something, you know, like jousting or whatever. And I got into the habit of moving my mouse cursor down to the bottom when the jousting was. This is the jousting. When the jousting begins and the rider is coming towards you and you're moving towards it, I moved my mouse cursor to the ground, moved it along. You can't see a cursor point, by the way. You only see the end of your javelin. And then I'd hold the left mouse button and move up and hit the shield dead center. And it would knock them off. And it worked every time. It's like you find your niche. I always found the raiding hard because if you're good at jousting, you tended to find you were moderate or bad at something else. And therefore, when I went into with my sword against the soldiers, I tended to find I was button mashing like mad, moving the mouse up and down, had very little effect. So I totally get where you're coming from. But it didn't take away from the fact that I won that game more times than I want to remember. I played that game to death, and actually it's one where I actually completed it, and it had an ending, which was great. Some people would say, is that it? But no, it's all about the journey to the ending, isn't it? And I had immense fun playing like Risk on a board that was England, and thinking about all of those films like Robin Hood and and the Tudor films and all of this sort of stuff. When I was playing the game, my active imagination took over, which is and then of course it was on my new Amiga, so that was brilliant. Astrum is astronomy. Hang on. Astrum is astronomy, cosmology, not astrology. One is science, the other is woo-woo. Yeah, sorry, it's me getting my words slipped out. Of course, I love astronomy. I love the planets and all of that stuff. I'm not into Sagittarius and Capricorn and all that bollocks. Sometimes when I'm talking passionately about something, I'll get the words slipped up. It's my brain. Just put it down to that. And I do apologize to you, Colin, and anybody else that was listening. You continue. I've managed to loot Choplifter since the stream. Absolutely marvelous. And I'll tell you what, another one of my favorite games. One that I have played in the arcades, but it's the home ones that I remember playing, and the Commodore 64 one in particular. But I did play VIC-20 versions and Apple II versions, and even Mega Drive versions. It's such a staple point of ideas that have been moved into other games as well. I love that game. So glad to see a more upbeat week. I hope things continue to go as well as can be expected, or better. And that's why I love you so much. Thank you so much, Colin. What a lovely line and sentiment. But you continue. My question: when do you think the AI bubble that's screwing up the entire industry will burst? And what do you think will be the fallout after it goes pop? To be quite honest with you, and this is the depressing thing about it, I don't see the AI bubble popping. Not like Bitcoin. I've mentioned it before. Looking into it in the last couple of weeks, and looking at RAM prices, where they're now talking about China coming into this, by the way, as being a company that will rise up the ranks of Crucial pulling out, is that some people think that AI is a bubble. They look at it and go, there isn't enough financial data to say that the business can maintain itself within AI. And so therefore look and see when the bubble will burst. And then there's the other side that think we're already in a boom period. We've already got the hard evidence that says AI works and will make you money. And so we are not in a bubble bursting position. We're in a boom period. And every one of those, both aspects of that, have an endpoint where you turn around and say, where does it end? And nobody can second guess it that I know of. What will life be like at the other end? Well, the fat cats will be richer. From my point of view, we'll all have worse computers than we've got at the moment, talking to bigger computers that will give you the answers that they want using ChatGPT and all the rest of it. I don't want that life. I'm glad I'm not hopefully going to see that. Well, I hope not. It could happen. But I think that's where we're heading. So I hope that gives you your answer, Colin. Thank you so much. And yours is the last person for me to read out. So thank you so much to everybody that commented. I hope I gave subsequently good answers. I'm just going to go and check with my sister on something for a minute. When I come back, I'll do the watched on part, and that'll be the end of the blog. So won't be a moment. I've also got to go over to a shop. I forgot to put the stuff that's arrived this week down here as films bought. So won't be a moment.
And we're moving on now to the end pretty much of the blog, which is what I watched on YouTube, which is split into 3 segments as always. And the first section watched on YouTube is a sort of a general section, and it always contains 4 that I religiously watch, which is This Week in Retro, Tech Moan, Gadget Show, and Chronologically Gaming. So This Week in Retro, I enjoyed it, but it really didn't have subject matters that really resonated with me. That's the word, isn't it? There was Australian computer history, docos. That was the first one, which was talking more about hardware that's come out of Australia. That was not too bad. Golf and grids, which is sort of like a little bit about golfing games and how golf has been as a sport during COVID and all of that sort of stuff. So they talked about leaderboard and rotoscoping and all of that, which I know about. So I didn't really learn anything. But it did make me think of my past, because I used to play golf. I used to like playing golf, but with sciatica and me and the very twisting of your spine when you're playing golf meant that I was out of the golf well before COVID. And the last one was called Amiga Doormat, which was just a weird title really for something that wasn't about doormatting or anything like that. So it was okay, but I've learned an awful lot through This Week in Retro on previous shows, and this one had less in it. So that's what made it still enjoyable, but not something that I came away going, I had a really good time with that one this week. Made me food for thought and all of that. No, not really. But whichever way you look at it, it's an immense show, and I'll continue to watch it. It's brilliant. Tech Moan always entertains me because it's equipment that I never had, but equipment that I saw in Dixon's and Curry's and Comet and all of those sort of places that I wished I'd had. Always looking at things like record decks and mini disc players and MP3 players and all of that sort of stuff, boom boxes, and does it with modern and sort of like historical look at things. So that was great. He did the AEI 4-gram music machine, sort of like an 8-track player, but much bigger, and used when you wanted something just playing in the background or something that complemented what you were doing as a presentation. Could be used in shops, all that sort of stuff. And he actually went into the tapes themselves and took them apart and showed you what was inside it and the importance of sponges and stuff like that. That was great. Gadget Show, nothing again this week. I'm pretty sure there'll be something this week. It's been for nearly 4 weeks now. And Chronologically Gaming is continued with 1982 and was very enjoyable because the sort of like scope game
that he always tends to have in it was Penetrator on the ZX Spectrum. And he had nothing but praise really for it, really, especially with the editor that's built into Predator. Penetrator, should I say. So that was great. And I that took me back to my early play on Spectrum. I played it more on the Commodore 64, but that was later. And it wasn't as good on the Commodore 64. Definitely a game I recommend that you play Spectrum mostly. But like I said, it was on other machines. He even talked about the fact it came out from Beam Software and Melbourne House and how it was distributed differently in other countries. That was good. Enjoyed that. Then I saw that there was a documentary that came up in my alerts. And it isn't a documentary. It's a documentary that is not out yet. It was more a trailer for it, but it was 12 minutes long. And it's from Spoon Jar Films. And the documentary, when it is released, is called On the Trail of Stan and Ollie. So you know me and Laurel and Hardy. Anybody that sort of like brings up briefly about Laurel and Hardy, I instantly am listening. I'm going, oh, right, what have you got? What you got? What you got? Tell me. And I get excited. So there's a YouTube channel out there called Spoon Jar Films, and it's a 12-minute thing on the trail of Stan and Ollie. Brilliant. Absolutely marvellous. Can't wait for that. Then there was Re-U Universe. That's the channel name. And it was another one of those historical ones that I've been watching just recently. And it was called What's Under London. And it basically showed you the layers of ground below London and how far, if you dig, you get to the sections which are still prevalent for when the Romans controlled London, with its name not really just called London. You'd need to go and have a look. So it's before Boadicea and all the rest of it. And it talks about the hidden sort of like water reservoirs that are there, how they're trying to make those work again, how they continue to still flood, and so they're there, and how far deep down you go to get to them, etc., etc. I enjoyed my time watching that history lesson. It was great. I watched LGR this week. It wasn't a new one. It was a channel that came up probably because of the stuff that I was watching in regards to VR and wearable tech. And it was called Deja View. Not Deja View. Deja View. The odd $400 camera glasses from 2003. So yeah, in 2003 there was wearable tech, $400 or around that price it was, and it was just a camera that strapped onto your actual normal glasses and captured. So wearable tech back in 2003, and that was interesting. Really got my juices flowing in my brain in regards to that. Then there was another historical one called History Hit. That's the channel name. The actual episode was called Tudor Historian Breaks Down Queen Elizabeth I Movie Deep Dive. So anybody that knows me knows that I like Queen Elizabeth I. It's just called Elizabeth. And the second film, Elizabeth I, The Golden Age. And you've got a true Tudor historian breaking down the film and saying what was true and what was not, what was sort of like taking privileges for drama sense. So that was brilliant, because I don't know enough. I'm not a historian like this girl was. And she introduced me and made me think about things I hadn't thought about. I went, oh, right, was that true? Oh, okay. Brilliant. And then the last one was Dan Snow's History Hit. Now, this was there because I was looking up all the stuff about history, and it was David Mitchell, who's in the Fast Show and some other history comedy programs. He's written a book about the Vikings, and he was there plugging that a little bit, but it was he was doing what they call a roast. Now, if anybody has heard that word roast, means they usually do it to the living, where a load of your peers come out and they roast you about things you've said, done, and how you actually are, and how you're characterized in real life. I've seen no end of them for Peter Falk, say, in Columbo, or Harrison Ford, or even Donald Trump has been roasted. And so this was called David Mitchell Roasts History's Most Overrated Monarchs. So he was saying how bad Alfred the Great was and all of this sort of stuff, why they were shit. And also why we don't learn from history and why we don't take ownership of things. In the past, we took ownership of stuff a little bit more than we do now. So back when the raids were going on from the Vikings, say, the Britons would say, what can we do about it? But also, what is it that's making this happen? And they did things that they could to protect themselves. But they took ownership of it all. COVID, what do we say? Somebody ate a bat somewhere. You could never have second guessed it. Wasn't our fault. That's it. Without going into taking ownership of what humanity is doing. Yeah, I totally agreed with that. So that was what I watched on YouTube. And we got my section on films, which you know is big in my life. Films, TV, soundtracks, it's all big on my life. So I have a section called Film, TV and Soundtrack YouTube. And top of the list is Ian Hill, The Ramblings. And as I said, what a supporter of me. Absolutely fantastic. In fact, stop what you're listening to now. Go over there. Subscribe to him. Please do it. But if you're not, wait until the end of the blog. Go and have a little look. See what he's done. But this is what he's done this week because I've written it down for you. He's done the top 5 historical films in each year for 1996 to 2002. And this has been an ongoing thing on shorts that he's been doing. You can imagine it goes back to the 20s and 30s, when films were silent, and mentioned the top 5 films that he's watched and enjoyed. He did a Doctor Who review of The Rescue. Fantastic. It's always nice to see William Hartnell get a bit of love. He did an X-Files review of Season 5, Episode 15. He's going hell for leather with that particular series of stuff. What I watched, Episode 2, he started to do a new thing where he's listing out the films that he's watched this week, which he usually used to do in the blog. He still does. He mentions a few things in this particular blog because I read them out. But he goes into a bit more depth with his particular episodes on what he's watched. And then, of course, he did a live with me, which is episode 91. And we're heavily going towards number 100. And I had a brilliant time. Fantastic. So that's great. There you are, Ian Hill, The Ramblings. What are you waiting around for? Go and have a little look. Moving on, there's Mondo Chelovic Movies. The last couple of weeks he's been doing his Patreon only to his subscribers, but he's done one for the general public this time. It was January 2026 Vinegar Syndrome purchases, because he's part of the Vinegar Syndrome's purchase program where he pays a year's worth of membership and they send him all the films that you can purchase in that month of release from Vinegar. So brilliant. I can never afford those. They're too expensive and they go into this country, but it's a great program. If I had the money, I'd be doing it. Mondo is especially good at horror, and I watch him mostly for that, but he's got insights into everything else as well. So he's definitely worth a watch. Then we get to my mate, Through the Lens, who's changed his channel name to Just Joshings. That's quite an interesting name. I think it's to do with how social media is handling him at the moment. But he did some shorts, the best of the year so far, a question mark about that in regards to 28 years later, The Bone Temple, which has just been released.
Is it the best of the films so far this year? Question mark. See, always interesting to listen, to see how people structure their stuff. He also did We've All Come to the World's Fair. That's a review of a film that's been released this week. And Oscar nominations announcement. So he covered a little bit about the Oscars, which is a no-brainer for me that he would do that based on his channel. So salute to him, and of course link to his in the description of this blog. Then you got Jim Jam Movies and TV, my friend Jim Jam, who I've met a couple of times in his hometown, and we've had a great time. And he's always looking out for me, always sending little text messages to me saying, "Oi, go and have a look at this website. They've got a film that you might be interested in at a cheap price." So that's brilliant. But this week he did a rant. And I'm not surprised he ranted. I'd be probably ranting as well. It's all to do with buying from a reputable source. In this particular instance, I think it was Music Magpie, but it could have been also World of Books. I'm not sure. A block of discs that he wanted to buy called You Only Live Twice, I think it was. He'd set up an eBay selling for his ones that he had on the shelf because he wanted to buy the complete edition in one box, which gave him more space, and he never received anything for weeks. He'd put the old ones on sale till it ran down the clock to the point where he couldn't retract the sale. And when it came to the delivery of the particular object that he wanted to buy, it was empty. And he can't, and therefore he's not going to get his product. And he's now selling off something that he hasn't got a replacement for. I've been there, seen that, done it myself. You have to be very careful here, Jim Jam, in regards to putting something up for sale that you haven't received the replacement for yet. We all fall into that trap, matey, and I don't blame you for having a rant. How you could send an empty envelope and put it through the letterbox and say, "Here you are, done and complete," I don't know. Stupid. Then we've got Commode and Mayo's take, and they did reviews of the following films: History of Sound, Safan, No Other Choice, H is for Hawk, and the Box Office Top 10. Always a good watch. You get to know about all sorts of films, a lot of them world cinema, so that's great. And then we've got Movie Collector, who did a review of the 4K edition of Leon or Assassin. I can understand his thoughts and ideas on the extended version of Leon, but I still love it. So that's fantastic. And lastly but not least, it's Game and Tech on YouTube. And these are people that I know sort of like through actual chats, you know, phone chats, part of my Discord, part of Mainmeister's Discord, part of the scene. And with the top one we've got is Down the Rabbit Hole. He did a couple of videos this week. He did Star Frontiers, Ever Had a Spacecraft Crash Land in Your City? That was interesting because I've not done too many role-playing board games, and it interests me what they divulge as what the Dungeon Keeper was thinking and everything else. He also did Is PSVR 2 Theft Game good after a patch? This patch was supposed to have a patch to the old graphic engine where things are too dark or too light, and I'm with him. I saw very little difference, but it was patched up. They did some other little basic little patches, but we didn't do the one that's listed right at the top, not that we could see, and so things look a little bit washed out, light, bright, you know, not natural blackness that you'd get. So that was interesting. And the last one was playing Tilt Pinball while trying Tilt Beer. So he poured himself a beer that was called Tilt,
Haha, there's the pun in regards to the pinball. And he was playing pinball and drinking this beer, and he was enjoying every moment of it. And so I hope he does. I won't be a moment. Sorry, something's just happened. Like I say, I apologise for so many breaks. I've not been feeling very well, a bit fatigued. But the breaks have helped. I hope that's noticed from when you saw the end of the last blog and to the end of this blog. And we've covered down the rabbit hole. Got a fantastic channel. I'm moving on to another great friend of mine, Robert's Retro Gaming. And if you're ever into your gameplay, you know, whether it be on all game systems or just a select few, you really do need to go to Robert's Retro Gaming, Canadian royalty. He basically covers, well, I'll show you what he covered. He's done Dwarf Fortress Classic, which is a game on Steam, if you're interested. Episode 23, so you could learn an awful lot about that game and whether you might be remotely interested. Minecraft, you know how much he's into his Minecraft, and I played Minecraft to death as well. In some ways I wish I was still playing it, but I know I'd need an enormous amount of hours. He's up to episode 178. That just shows how much he's into that one. He started getting into the Pico 8, which I play a little bit on my little handheld. But he's started to play a couple of games, and he's played Wizard's Rule, which is a version of Wizards of War, the arcade game from the very early 1980s, late 1970s. I think it's early 80s. And I played that on the VIC-20 and the Commodore 64 mostly. But Pico 8's version is really quite good. Talking about the Commodore 64, he played a game called Web Dimension. This one was probably the most interesting of all the ones that I saw there because I played it. I knew the Zap review was damning of it. It's not really a game, it's a journey. The best thing about it is the weirdness of its graphics, because it is weird, and the music that was in it, which was very advanced, I think, for a very early Commodore 64 game. Lots of filters being used. So that was quite good, but it is a pretty piss poor game, really. I bought it. I know. It was by Activision. So there's that. Then he played a SNES game, Chrono Trigger, which, if anybody knows, is a role-playing game. And the only difficulty I have with that is role-playing games really need, they really do have hours and hours of gameplay in them. And if you're only playing it for about 20 minutes to show it off, you don't really learn an awful lot. But I still was totally entertained by it. And then he played various Atari 8-bit games, because that's his bread and butter, Atari. And the games he played were Pyramid Run, Hockey, Money Raider, and Pie Man. And the only one that I didn't really get into was Hockey. It looked like an Atari 2600 game, not a Atari 400 or 800 game. And it's Hockey. And I've got very little interest in Hockey. And it looked like a two-player game anyway, with some AI on how it moves in regards to you controlling multiple players. Didn't think much to that. But overall, what a week. Look at that. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 videos to watch in a 7-day period. My God, man. Slow down, you little shit. Then we get to Steve's Gaming. He's carrying on his home soft discs. He's gone from 96 to 101. Now, he did that in 2 videos, 96 to 97 and 98 to 101. Certain games he doesn't like to demonstrate because there's no point. Text Adventures being one, and a few others that he has the choice to say, yeah, I want to play that, or no, I don't. But he'll load it up and show you. So that really, and then he did just yesterday Spectrum games and a problem at the end. And I'm hoping it's not the end of Steve's channel, but his capture card broke at the end of yesterday, Saturday, as we're recording this on a Sunday. And he needs to buy now a new capture card. It's probably one of the reasons why he was having such problems. It hasn't held him back, but I do hope that the next capture card he gets is one that's a bit more reliable for him. Bless him. Really like his stuff. Then you've got my friend Salute, my friend. And we get to Colin Jones, aka Ponder. He did everything 64 January challenge, which in this case is star post on the Commodore 64. I played this on the VIC-20 just recently. I don't have a paddle control, so I could only get so far in the levels. But he's played both the VIC-20 and now the Commodore 64 version. I enjoyed them both. Absolutely brilliant. And lastly, we've got, and Salute, my friend. Lastly, we've got 20th Century Gaming, who did a live on the Commodore 64 on Friday, which really broke up my week, and it was great to move into the weekend watching my friend 20th Century Gaming. Now, I'd normally mention Mainmeister, but he's on holiday. He's gone to Benidorm for a week. So he'll be back next week, and I'm pretty sure he'll be itching to do some recordings. If not next week, it'll be the week after. I know what it's like going on holiday abroad, short trips, long trips, whatever. I just look forward to all his stuff when it comes out. So there's only what to show you really now to go, and there isn't that much that I've been showing off just recently. But I will drop to my overhead cam. It's not set particularly well, it's too far away, but you'll be able to see these. So there's Cromwell, based on the recommendation from my friend Ian Hill, The Ramblings. It was relatively cheap because you can see it's not a steelbook or anything, so it was very easy, and I'm looking forward to watching that film. Then there's one called The Smashing Machine, which came up as a recommendation from a friend, and this was from a friend at work. He said if you have to have one fighting sort of like sporty game in your collection, get this one. It's based on a true story. He mentioned the word true story, and instantly I was gripped. And the last one is one that I've only watched the first film of, and that's Black Phone 2. I've watched Black Phone 1 but never seen Black Phone 2. It's had mixed results, but that means nothing. I'll look into that. You can see it's in English. It's a steel book. Quite looking forward to it. And so I'll probably be taking the cover off of that and watching that this week. And that concludes the blog. So I'll move back to the normal camera and just say thanks very much for watching. I know these blogs can sometimes be lengthy. The last couple have been a little bit shorter, which is great, I think, for some people. Whenever I've got something I want to discuss, I'll get it off my chest here. So I'm hoping that you've enjoyed yourself. I want to say thank you to everybody that got to the end and watched this. Absolutely brilliant. And we're approaching year 5, so watch this space for any celebration I might be doing. And with that, I'm going to say salute, which is what Frankie Howard always said at the end of Up Pompeii. Thanks very much, guys and gals. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.